What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here once again on the Thomas Take Sports podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or whether you're tuning in on Facebook or listening via all audio podcasting platforms. I greatly appreciate the love and support that Bills Mafia has shown me since I started my podcast, what is now 6 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying that, but here I am 6 years later. We're into the sixth, quote unquote, seventh season of me covering the Buffalo Bills on my podcast, and I've greatly enjoyed every single minute of it. But look no further than this upcoming season. I have never been so excited for a Buffalo Bills season than I am right here, right now, inching closer and closer to Buffalo Bills training camp. And why is that? Why am I so excited for this Buffalo Bills season in comparison to other seasons that I've covered the Buffalo Bills on this podcast, of course? Well, it's a very simple answer to a very interesting question. And the answer is I wholeheartedly believe that this season the Buffalo Bills have the team to very well win bring home their very first Super Bowl Lombardi trophy. Now, AFL championships aside, 64, 65, much respect to those guys. But in the modern era, the Buffalo Bills have, of course, been unable to bring home that Super Bowl championship. And I think this team, the way Sean McDermott has coached it, and especially the way Brandon Beane has built it, I have reason to believe that the Buffalo Bills can get it done this upcoming season. But heading into every season, there are always questions to be had, questions to be asked, and those questions are questions that I will pose to you, the audience, and I will answer to you, the audience, in this very episode. So, with that being said, let's get right to it. I have 5 questions that I think are the biggest 5 questions for the Buffalo Bills heading into this season. Ryan Thomas, the 5 questions. The first one, number 5, will the run game be better? Now, this is a talking point that I've discussed what feels like ad nauseum for the last few seasons. Gone is Brian Daboll. We'll get to that a little bit later when discussing some of the other questions on this team. But number 5, will the running game be better? And I have reason to believe that it will be better. And my main talking point as to why is just the overall improvement on paper of areas of this offense in which the run game was lacking. Up front, on the line, Roger Saffold was a huge piece. Second round draft choice, James Cook, younger brother of Minnesota Vikings running back Dalvin Cook, was another piece to the puzzle. And bringing back, once again, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, who have been here for the last few seasons and have been impact players, especially Singletary. I think we're all waiting for that big breakout moment from Zach Moss, but hasn't come yet. But who's to say that it won't this season? Can this run game be better? Will the run game be better with those additions on the offensive line? With the additions that we have added to this team, the physicality that we've added to this team over the course of an offseason. O.J. Howard, can O.J. Howard also help the Buffalo Bills run game as more of a blocking tight end as well, with Dawson Knox adding that different dimension to the offense? Can that help? In 2022 has to be better than it was in 2021. Up until, I would say, week 10, we rarely saw glimpses of a run game within that offense last season. It crippled the Buffalo Bills' chances at winning games that they should have won, albeit only winning the division by 1 game. The Buffalo Bills' wins-loss record should have been much better than what it finished with last season. And I think that is due in large part to the fact that the run game was lacking. Devin Singletary really didn't get going, as I mentioned, until week 10. Zach Moss, as I mentioned, has not been able to get going. What dimension in this offense could be added to this season that wasn't in last season equals James Cook, a running back that can really do a little bit of everything. He's not really the best blocker. He's a smaller running back, but he is a running back that can line up wide. He can run routes. He can catch very well. And he's a home run threat type running back that the Buffalo Bills have not had since the days of Fred Jackson, C.J. Spiller, LaShawn McCoy. You know, those are running backs that have their own different skill sets in comparison to James Cook. Obviously, they're very different from James Cook. I'm not lumping James Cook into those discussions of being similar to a Marshawn Lynch, a Fred Jackson, or a Shady McCoy, but dare I say it, could be very similar to a CJ Spiller, who we saw have the last truly great single season for the Buffalo Bills as a running back in what was, I think, 2011, 2012. So the Bills need to make their run game better. I think it'll take a big amount of pressure off of a quarterback like Josh Allen to have a better run game. And I will go to this talking point, and I've referred to it a few times on the show, but talking about it here in depth and detail, Tony Romo, not the commentator on NFL on CBS. I'm talking about when Tony Romo was the Dallas Cowboys starting quarterback. His best single season by far. He had a lot of great years in Dallas, and I think some of those years are a little bit overrated, dare I say, but some of those years were legitimate. But no year was more legitimate than 2014. When Tony Romo was able to rely on DeMarco Murray, it truly opened up the pass game for Romo. It made Romo's numbers super inflated. And dare I say it, when you have a run game as great potentially as what Buffalo could have with James Cook, with Devin Singletary, and the arrival of Zach Moss, hopefully fully submerging himself into this offense more than he has in years past, with the running game improvements on the offensive line, I do believe that this run game should be better. And I do believe that this run game, these running backs, these players have what it takes to make this run game better. I don't want to read, I don't want to hear about Devin Singletary is not good enough, Zach Moss is not good enough, James Cook is not good enough. These guys can get it done. It's just a matter of getting this offensive line finally figured out in ways that we have been unable to do so. And I will say that was a factor last season. The Buffalo Bills were able to figure out quite a lot over the course of last season in terms of their offensive line. With Tommy Doyle, Spencer Brown, two young linemen. You know, I am a little bit disappointed in the fact that Cody Ford really seems like he's played himself out of a job, you know, as far as a starting job, at least with Buffalo. We'll see come training camp, but will the run game be better? I think that's a huge question, and I do think it will be something that will be a huge talking point this season. My number 4 question, Spotlight. The spotlight is on. Who is it on? It is on Tremaine Edmunds. I talked about this on my guest spot with the Buffalo nerd known as Colt Schroeder, good friend of mine, good friend of the show, former guest of the show. He'll be back on the show within the next week or so. And in talking with Colt, he asked me a question, and it was a very valid question. It's a very interesting question. It's a very realistic question. Who would you rather re-sign on the Buffalo Bills, Tremaine Edmunds or Dawson Knox? And I said Knox. And you guys can find out why. I won't go into that whole question. I want you to tune into that episode, find out for yourself. If not, I will post it on my pages, my channels, everything, and you guys can check that out for yourselves as I have allergies today and itch my eye. Tremaine Edmunds is a player that I really like in terms of his athleticism, 6'5", 240 pounds, and he has speed for that size, 6'5", 240, and to have that speed is just truly freakish out on the middle of the field as a middle linebacker. But I've not been happy with the lack of evolution, the lack of growth from Tremaine Edmunds. I haven't seen Tremaine Edmunds continue to get better and better each and every year in ways that Josh Allen has each and every season. Tremaine Edmunds, to me, has a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to get better, and that doesn't mean he can't get better or can't grow heading into this season. I'd be writing him off far too soon, especially when the Buffalo Bills have brought on guys like Von Miller to a defense when Von Miller should make the pieces around him better. But Tremaine Edmunds, to me, has a lot of work to do in terms of instincts, in terms of understanding his assignment, understanding the down and distance, understanding the situation. And each middle linebacker that I have seen that has been a truly great middle linebacker in this league over the course of the last few years. Guys like Brian Urlacher, guys like Patrick Willis, guys like Ray Lewis. Yes, those guys arguably are all Hall of Famers. London Fletcher as well. I'd throw London Fletcher into the Hall of Fame right now if I had a vote, if I had a say in the matter. So I'm not comparing, Tremaine Edmonds to those guys. What I'm saying is that's the bar. That generation, my generation, those are the guys that every linebacker after those linebackers should be looking at and saying, okay, these are the linebackers that I have to play up to. These are the guys that I have to step up and be on that level. I have to be on that level. If I'm not on that level, then I'm not it. I'm not at where I need to be. And Tremaine Edmonds is nowhere near that level. And yeah, he's a young player. He was drafted at 19. But at some point, you're in your fourth year, you're in your fifth year. You're asked to be the man in the middle for a defense that is supposed to be a Super Bowl caliber defense. The offense is Super Bowl caliber. The defense was rated number 1 throughout the majority of last season. And yet, Tremaine Edmonds, on often critical situations, was nowhere to be found or found himself on the outside looking in. And the spotlight is on. Tremaine Edmonds has to be better this year compared to last season. He has to be much better than he was last season compared to this season. So Tremaine Edmonds is somebody that I think is a huge question mark on this team. Whether he remains on this team long term fully hinges on how good or not so great, not so good, he'll be in 2022. He has to be great, I think. I think being good will only get the Bills so far. We know that. We know how good the Bills can be. We know how a good Bills team can look and how good can lead to an AFC championship game appearance or being knocked out in the divisional round. The Bills need to be great everywhere in order to win the Super Bowl. So Tremaine Edmonds is a huge question mark for me. The spotlight is on. This year, he's got to get it together. Number 3, a huge question on this team. And to be quite honest with you, when I put this list together, putting this question at number 3 was one that I thought, man, could I put this one at number 1? I really think I could. I'll let you guys debate that. And obviously, of course, I want to remind you guys that when you're tuning in, fire away some comments in the comment section on my Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take and Instagram as well, YouTube and Facebook, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, and last and certainly not least, subscribe to the show via YouTube or like on Facebook. I really appreciate the interaction. I really appreciate the discussion throughout the journey that I've had here on this show. Number 3, the number 3 question is, will Trey White return to form? An ACL injury in 2022 is not as bad as it was in 1992 or in 2002 or in 2012 for that matter. We have evolved so much in terms of medical science and in terms of sports medicine, sports science, however you want to look at it. We have evolved immensely in terms of our technology that we have at our disposal. And not only that, I do believe that there are certain cases where some ACL injuries are worse than others. And, Trey White's ACL injury, I would have to bring on my injury expert, Kyle Trimble, and I have in the past many a times, but he would have a much more educated discussion on, or analysis, I should say, on whether or not Trey White would be ranked as far as one of the worst ACL injuries or one of the not so bad ACL injuries. The way I look at it is this. I'm not a doctor, wouldn't claim to be, would never pretend to be. But one thing I do know in sports is that when you suffer an injury that puts you out for an entirety of a season, you really have to work your way back. One thing I know, you really have to work your way back. And I've seen it. I've never experienced it, thank God, but I've seen it up close and personal. And it is not fun for the athlete, mentally and physically. Just as much mentally as it is physically. Can Trey White return to form on both fronts, mentally and physically? We have to talk about Trey White prior to this injury before we talk about Trey White after this injury. Prior to the injury, Trey White was one of the top 3 corners in the National Football League, and rightfully so. Each and every week, from the moment he stepped on the field for the Buffalo Bills, he was given the task of lining up against the best of the best. As soon as he was drafted, hey kid, we're giving you the best. We're not giving you second rate. We're giving you the best. Going up against Julio Jones as a rookie. You're going up against X, Y, and Z as a rookie. Julio Jones is the only name that's coming to mind, but you guys get my point. Trey White is a stud. When Josh Allen was asked who does he hate to play against the most, he said Trey White. And what he was referring to, obviously, in training camp. Josh Allen is probably as happy as anyone that Trey White is on his team rather than being on another team and Josh Allen playing against him, or vice versa. Trey White, prior to this injury, was a real one. And I do believe that had Trey White not gotten hurt, that would drastically impacted things. Drastically impacted things as far as how the Bills would have performed against Kansas City or against some of the other teams that they played against, even in victory. You know, Trey White is one of the 4 or 5, maybe top 3 best players on this roster. You know what? I'm going to say top 2 player on the roster, along with Josh Allen. So this question is rated number 3, and I put it 3rd, but you know what? I could honestly make this 1. A case could be made that this is 1. The tricky part about this is the Bills drafted a reinforcement, a big reinforcement. They put heavy draft capital into the corner position in this draft by drafting Kaiir Elam. That wasn't necessarily for the fact that, we hope Trey White is going to come back from his injury. We hope he can be what he was. That was for the fact that Levi Wallace left via free agency to Pittsburgh. So the Bills really had a big hole there, as well as the question of rushing, not rushing, but the question of Trey White coming back ready and healthy and not wanting to rush him, I should say. I do believe that Trey White will return to form in terms of being one of the elite corners in the league, but I do have a huge fear that Trey White will not play until week 3, 4, or 5. And maybe the rehab process is going along swimmingly. Maybe, just maybe, Trey White will be ready and available week 1. I hope he is. But I do believe that this ACL injury was one that was pretty gruesome, pretty horrific, and was one that will require time away beyond recovery. Because the recovery of the ligament, the recovery of the knee is one thing, but then getting it into football shape is another. And getting the rest of the body into football shape is another. And I think that Trey White will have to make that adjustment. And is there enough time in an off season to make that much of an adjustment when you want to be ready week 1? For Trey White, we'll find out. Trey White's one of those guys. Trey White can do anything. I wouldn't be shocked if Trey White was ready week 1 and did perform on an elite level en route to a Buffalo Bills Super Bowl victory this season. So will he return to form? I think he can. It's just a matter of when will he actually come back. Will it be week 1? Will it be week 4 or 5? Question number 2, can Von Miller make the immediate impact? This is my favorite question of the top 5 questions. Number 1's a good one. It's a great one. Number 1's a great one. But number 2 is one that really just brings a smile to my face because I still cannot believe that Von Miller is a part of the Buffalo Bills. I just, honestly, it's one of my favorite moves that the Bills have made in a very, very long time. And I think it's due in large part to the fact that Von Miller is a player that I feel like is was one of the missing pieces for the Buffalo Bills, as well as Kaiir Elam. They needed a pass rusher, they got one, Von Miller. They needed a corner, they got one in Kaiir Elam. Check. Those are 2 of the biggest additions of this offseason via free agency as well as draft, I would say. And Von Miller is not just any player. That's what I really want to hammer home for Bills Mafia. Von Miller is not just any other player. Von Miller has a pedigree, and that's a word that I rarely use on this show because I've never had an opportunity to really use it. But Von Miller has a pedigree that I think is a rarity in this league. Not only is it a rarity in this league, it's a rarity to find in free agency. Not only is it a rarity to find in free agency, it's a rarity that a player of that type of pedigree comes to Buffalo. So to see that happen and to understand why it happened and to understand and know full well of the player in and of itself, it's just a huge bonus for what is anticipated to be the Super Bowl season for the Buffalo Bills. And we're seeing in the media, we're seeing on social media, especially Von Miller going to Greg Rousseau, going to Boogie Basham, trying to teach him a thing or two along the defensive line. And that's something that you can't buy. You know, maybe they're paying him 16, 17 million a year to do those things, but that experience is priceless to me. That tutelage, there's no price on that. That's worth a lot more than the money that they're paying him, I think, because the Bills have heavily invested on this defensive line. And those guys, Gregory Rousseau and Boogie Basham, they have the talent, they have the athleticism, they have the potential, but can they get it done early? Can they be those impact type players that Von Miller was immediately in Denver as well as with the Rams? I'm very excited to see the impact, and I think 100% yes, Von Miller can make an immediate impact. I do think, though, that a lot of Bills fans are not really quite hitting the nail on the head with the role that Von Miller will be playing for this team. If I were to just assume, because that's all we're doing, we're speculating, we're assuming, if I were to assume the role that Von Miller will be playing on this team, it is just a pure headhunter downhill defensive end. I don't anticipate him playing linebacker hardly ever. I do see him as a pure defensive end. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and maybe as the season wears on, we do see him switch it up. But truthfully, I think Von Miller will make that immediate impact, and I think he's going to make an even bigger impact off the field as much as he will on the field. And I do believe that impact on the field will be remarkable. And I don't want to hear any more about Von Miller's age. Is he over the hill? Is he this? Is he that? Silly talk. Nonsense. Von Miller at 33, 32, however old he is a lot better than the majority of the guys than all of the guys at that age, at that position. Von Miller is a truly special athlete, special player, and those guys don't come around in free agency too often. So I love that question, and I even love answering it even more, I should say. So, number one, the biggest question of this offseason thus far, can Ken Dorsey make this offense even better? You guys know it as well as I do. You guys that have watched the show since day one, you've seen each and every season me break down the Buffalo Bills during the regular season week to week. You've seen me discuss the Bills during the offseason. You guys know that I was not the biggest OC Brian Daboll fan. There were moments where Brian Daboll infuriated me. There were moments, yes, where I thought the best thing for the Bills were to move on from Brian Daboll. And I got a lot of flack for that take, but a lot of people agree with me too. I don't do this stuff for everybody to agree with me. If I did, I'd be pretty dumb. I think I would be pretty dumb. Be pretty silly, I should say. Not dumb, silly. But there were moments where Brian Daboll, I felt like, didn't bring out the full arsenal of this offense. And there were moments where I felt like he did. But that's my point. It wasn't as consistent as I wanted it to be. And that goes back to my number 5 question in terms of the running game. This Bills offense is not a running offense. I understand that as well as anyone. But you have to have a run game when called upon. And the Bills didn't. I do believe the new additions will help. I do believe they can get that done going back to question 5. And parlaying that into question 1, Ken Dorsey, I do believe, will provide a new flair to this offense that we have not seen. I think gone are the days of this pass-happy stuff where you do see a little bit more of a flair West Coast offense style team where we do utilize role-playing offensive players. Guys like James Cook, guys like O.J. Howard, who I mentioned earlier in the show. Won't just be the same Diggs, Beasley, who's now gone. Won't just be the wide receivers getting the production. I think Josh Allen is going to be able to spread the ball around very, very well in this offense because Ken Dorsey is going to provide this team with plays that really spread things out. Less running from Josh Allen is something that I think Ken Dorsey will actually preach within that playbook. Getting Josh under center or getting Josh in shotgun, allowing him to throw the ball as quickly as he can, and getting that ball out quickly to avoid the hits, to avoid the long extended plays, and to avoid that hero ball that Josh Allen is known to play successfully and sometimes rarely unsuccessfully, but even rarely unsuccessfully is enough to kind of take that away, get that out of the game, and just parlay that into a broad spectrum of strength within Josh Allen's game. I wanted Ken Dorsey as the OC for probably the last 2 years. I felt like Daboll's writing was on the wall that he wanted the head coaching job wherever it may land, and ultimately he went to the Giants. I think Ken Dorsey is going to be great for this team, and I think it's a big question that a lot of people are asking, well, what type of offense can we have? Can it be even better? I think it can, because I think Josh Allen has not even reached his ceiling yet. I don't even know if Josh Allen does have a ceiling, first off, but I know for certain that he hasn't reached it thus far. And that excites me, and that it should excite Bills Mafia, and it should especially excite Ken Dorsey, who's going to have the ability to work with Josh Allen for a long, long time. Ken Dorsey could have went to the Giants to be their OC under Daboll. He could have went to another team to be their OC, but he said, nope, I'm staying in Buffalo because I love coaching Josh Allen. And bringing on the pieces that they brought in, I think will greatly help Ken Dorsey provide this team with a more balanced, across-the-board attack on the offensive side of the ball. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I really hope you guys enjoyed the show. I enjoy recording this show and providing my takes on all things Buffalo Bills. It's been a real fun journey thus far. There's obviously plenty more coming up throughout the rest of this offseason. And, of course, this regular season, it starts September 8th, 2022. We are almost 3 months away from the Bills taking on the LA Rams. Crazy. That 3 months will go very, very quickly. It'll be right around the corner, and I cannot wait for what I expect to be the Super Bowl winning season for the Buffalo Bills. Thank you to Bills Mafia for tuning in. For more of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, you can find it on YouTube, Facebook, and, of course, all audio podcasting platforms. I'm Ryan Thomas.